So Jon, the other Jon, the life coach is listening. He's sitting here, so he's taking notes. So fun, spontaneity, honesty. What about a sense of wonder?
Yeah, I think that we somewhat lose that as we get older.
Yeah. And sense of danger. Do boys like dangerous things?
I do.
That was a rhetorical question. Sorry about that. Magic. Get down from the table, Magic. Step down. Okay, I think we know what to ask. All right.
All right, we're
Thanks
set to go. Yeah, you're welcome. Have a great show. Stay tuned, everybody, for the Idea Lounge coming up next.
Did you know that every Friday is a holiday in Canada? What do you think of when I say Canadian music?
Celine Dion,
Bryan Adams,
Justin Bieber.
Nickelback.
Aw, there's so much more.
So grab your maple syrup and poutine and let's get Canadian.
Join us on This Great White North every Friday at 4:30 p.m. on 91.7 FM KOOP and at koop.org.
Hello and welcome. You are listening to Idea Lounge here on your community radio. This is KOOP Hornsby, Austin, 91.7 FM. We're also coming to you live on koop.org. This is Khotan Shahbazi Harman. If it is Thursday night at 6 p.m., it must be Idea Lounge, and I'm so happy that you're here with us. Tonight we have a treat for all you men out there. We have a life coach. Jon Zieve is here, and he's going to talk about some of the things that Magic and Jon were talking about, how to keep that sense of wonder, that sense of innocence, fun, play, and become a grown-up, be responsible at the same time. There are many challenges that our dear men are facing in today's world, and Jon is going to help sort through some of those. So stay put. We'll be right back. Thank you all for staying with us. Jon, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. Let's see, where do we even begin? Life coaching for men.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean?
Well, that's a good question. I started my career in management, and I realized after a while that really what I was good at was coaching. I didn't know it at the time, but my career evolved into coaching.
What is that? How did it happen like
Coaching is different than managing. Managing is kind of controlling other people or attempting to. And coaching is more guiding, more mentoring. So when I left my career in the tech world as a manager, director, I realized, I'm going to pursue this coaching aspect. So I went to life coaching school.
And what is a life coach? What do you do as a life coach?
I help people get in touch with who they are, get in touch with their own guidance, to ask tough questions to themselves. I don't give advice, but it's a guiding process. And there's a very specific way to go inside and ask questions and know that you're getting the truth.
So before we get to that, let's talk about your process. How did you come to this? So you were in the high-tech world, working there for a long time.
34 years.
34 years.
Yes.
And then what happened? You awakened?
Well, what happened is I got to a point where I felt I was kind of going through the motions. I wasn't passionate about what I was doing. And my body was speaking to me. My body was kind of acting out. It wasn't happy. Now, I didn't really understand that. I didn't know how to interpret my body acting out. Originally, I thought, well, my back was hurting, I'll go to a doctor and get it fixed. So I went to several chiropractors, I went to doctors, and everybody was willing to give me their impression.
Yes.
But the more I pursued that, the more I realized this wasn't about being fixed. This was about asking why I was in pain. And in that process of asking, I started to get answers. And that led me to, I'm not doing what I should be doing with my life.
And how's life different for you now than it was then?
Oh, it's dramatically different. I try to follow my heart. And that's really what I stand for. And by that I mean I listen to what is right for me, and I'm saying no to what's not right for me. When I was in the corporate world, I unconsciously, I was trying to please my boss, trying to please my customers. And what I didn't understand at the time was when you do that, you're actually not being authentic. You're actually putting a veil up over your heart and saying, I'm not going to listen to what my heart's saying. I'm going to try to be whatever it is
that is required.
That's required for me.
Yes.
And when I realized that, I realized I need to change.
Why is it so important to listen to the heart?
Well, we're all unique, and our hearts tell us who we are. If we don't listen to our heart, then who are we listening to? We're listening to someone, and if we're doing that, we're just not being authentic. We can't love ourselves, and we can't love anyone else unless we listen to our heart.
So you're not advocating that somebody listening to this show just say, okay, that's it, I'm not going to work tomorrow, throw it all away in some way. Okay.
No. This process took me a long time.
How long did it take you? Why does it take time?
Well, I remember, this is a quick story. My oldest brother, I have two older brothers. My oldest brother lives in San Diego. And it was about 7 years ago. I was at a birthday party, and a friend of his is a medical intuitive. I don't know if you've ever heard of that term.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
But medical intuitives, for those listeners that don't know, is someone who can look at you and they can read your energy. And by reading your energy, they can tell you where you have a block, an energy block.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't know who this guy was. He looked kind of funny. He actually looked like he was in a movie. He was all dressed up, kind of a short guy. He looked like a troll. And he said, "Can I scan you?" And I said, "Okay."
Not knowing what that meant.
Not knowing what it meant. And he made these funny noises, and he moved his fingers like he was a conductor in an orchestra. And after like a minute, he says, "Okay, well, your chakras are spinning fast, and that's all good, but you've got this problem in your lower right sacrum." And I said something that I can't say on the air. And from that moment on, I was fascinated by what he did. And I really wanted to know, how do you do that? How can someone do that? So that was the start of this process. And then, of course, the more I learned, I took an energy healing course that took 2 years. The more I started to learn, the more I started to ask these questions. So it really took me about 7 years to get to the point where I said, you know what? This is not what I want to do. I'm going to do something different. It's not an overnight process.
It's not an overnight. What are some of the challenges that our male listeners are facing?
Well, I think it starts with love. And in my case, I'll just share my own experience. I was raised by a great father, great man, very honorable, very moral person. Yet he was not emotionally available. He just didn't learn that from his father. And he didn't say much when it comes to emotions. And what I realized very recently was when you grow up with a father that's not emotionally available, you have a gap. You have a gap inside you. And what you do unconsciously is you seek to fill that gap by others filling it for you. So you're going outside of yourself in the form of seeking attention, seeking love, just seeking energy from others. And if you're a man, you're going to do that with a woman.
Mm-hmm.
But
or other men, if you're
or other men,
gay, yes.
Sure, absolutely. But what I realized is that doesn't work. And of course, the only way you realize that in my case was because I didn't have successful relationships. And the more in tune the women were that I was with, the more they could see that I was trying to take their energy from them. I was not aware of this. I was completely clueless. But when I became aware, then I have the responsibility to say, well, is this something that I want to do? I can take responsibility and make different choices.
So how does that look like when you were trying to take energy from these women?
What it looks like is you try to please. You try to please.
Pleasing them.
Whatever you think they want because you want something back in return.
Oh, so
that doesn't work.
I see. So it's a transactional thing. You give to receive.
I hate to say it that way, but that's the truth. Yeah, and that wasn't intentional, but that's what I was doing.
But isn't that what we're taught? That in order to get what you want, you have to give something?
Yeah, in a way. Unfortunately, that is the way we're taught. Yeah.
And so what should it be?
What should it be is when we identify this gap, which I think most men have, because most men were raised by dads that, were not emotionally in touch, and it wasn't their faults because their fathers were not either.
What does that mean, Jon? Let's first define that before you answer my other question. What does it mean that they are not emotionally available? What does it look like when they are, so we can see what it would be when it's absent?
Being emotionally available is allowing, let's say I'm a father and my son, I'm allowing my son to express himself however he feels.
Without judgment on your
Without
part.
judgment, and accepting him completely. not trying to fix him, not putting expectations on him that he needs to be a certain way. That is being emotionally available. It doesn't mean that you need to teach them how to be emotional. We all have emotions.
Yes.
But allow them to express them and not feel judged.
Interesting. What if you trigger something in your father, or your son triggers something in you unknowingly?
Well, that happens all the time, and that's good. And the way to deal with that, what I've learned, is you allow it to come in and say, oh, I'm afraid of something here. Oh, that's interesting. What am I afraid of? And you allow the feeling to be what it needs to be. And what I've learned, this is so fascinating to me, what I've learned is most of these feelings are hidden for two reasons. One reason is we've inherited a lot of emotional baggage from both sides, not only our fathers, but our mothers. And that goes back through their ancestors. And I believe this, and I'm not sure everyone does, but when we're born, we actually are born with these emotions that have not been resolved. They're in us. They're in our cells. And so that's one reason why we can get triggered. The other reason is we all have what I've heard the term shadows. And I've done a lot of work with Caroline Mace. And she's all about archetypes.
That's right. And she's a medical intuitive.
And she's a medical intuitive, and that's why I was interested in her. And what I learned from her is that we have 12 archetypes, 4 of which we share with everyone. Those are survival archetypes. But the other 8 are unique to us. And inside all of those archetypes is a shadow aspect.
So give us an example.
An example would be the child. The child is one of the 4 survival archetypes. The shadow element of the child is someone who's very immature, that's going to pout, that's going to kind of put their foot down and say no. And, jealousy, everything you think of about an immature child. If we're not aware that that's part of us, and we pretend it's not, then that can come up and actually control the way we act without us knowing it. We're not conscious of it. So the work then becomes getting in touch with the shadow aspect of all of our archetypes. And when we can do that, then the fear starts going away.
This is a big ask you're making from a lot of men, because one is open up, second is understand that you have a different side to you, accept that shadow side, and then also be able to integrate it.
Yes and no. It is a big ask, but the reason I say no is women have come into their power, and the relationships between men and women are not what they used to be. So for a healthy relationship with an assertive, empowered woman, men have to do this work. They have to be balanced with their female mates. The only way to do that is to shift and to go inside. And it's such a beautiful thing. It is so beautiful to start trusting your intuition.
Intuition is?
Intuition is listening to your heart. There's no difference.
Listening to your heart. So
Yes.
What does intuition tell you?
Intuition tells you everything. It tells you who you are. It tells you what your purpose is. It tells you how to be the best person you can be.
How do you get in touch with your intuition?
Well, I went kind of on a course starting with a pendulum, and that fascinated me. But eventually I realized we all have this gift of intuition. No one is immune to this. We're getting signals 24 hours a day about what is in. Here's the easiest way to think about it, is start paying attention to your energy. energy is going to tell you if you're in sync or not. So if you don't feel good energy, if you feel like you're lacking in energy, and you're with a certain person, for example, well, that's a message that there's something that either you're doing or they're doing that's causing you to leak energy.
Interesting.
If you're with somebody or you're doing something that gives you energy, that's huge. That's a message from the universe that that's what you need to be doing.
However, you have to be very careful that there's some individuals who are manic depressive. So they get a lot of energy when they're high, and then they become depressives, and then it's gone. So there are these, I've been around individuals like that, and it's just astonishing how up they are.
True.
And they feel like this is exactly the right thing to do.
True.
And then they have no perspective because it's not based on intuition. It's more chemically driven.
Yes, and that's an imbalance, and it's going from one polarity to the other. So, yeah, I'm not advocating that if you're unbalanced, you need to probably work with someone to help you get more balanced. But intuition is absolutely our ability to know what's right for us and to start saying no to what's not right for us. Men have problems saying no because they don't want to hurt people.
That's what you hear about women, that women don't like to
No,
say
but men
no.
have the same problem.
Really?
I think so. Now, I could be wrong, but
And why
I've
is
seen this with myself and I've seen this with my clients.
Is that right? And what is it that they're afraid of doing? Whom are they afraid of hurting?
Well, if they're like me and they're trying to please, it's tough to say no.
Because they want to be loved? They want to be accepted?
They're seeking love. They're seeking love.
So it is a sense of this energetic sign that they're holding up. Please love me, don't hurt me, accept me, that kind of a thing. It's so interesting to think about men in that light.
I think there's a misconception about
Yes,
men. I
of
really
course.
do. Men are just as emotional as women, but they don't necessarily express it. And they don't have a framework and a language to express it. Now, you get men with men, especially in sports, and they're very expressive. And heart is everything about sports. You talk to someone who's a good athlete, and they talk about heart. So men are definitely as emotional as women.
So it's just that within that arena, they're given latitude to feel.
Yes.
It's interesting. So within sports, hence the love of sports, wanting to play sports, you get to connect mainly with other men in a socially accepted environment that allows you to feel.
And that's why men love sports.
Interesting.
It's a bonding. And if you look at some of these really, really good coaches, Joe Madden with the Cubs, Urban Meyer with Ohio State, Pete Carroll with formerly USC, now Seattle. These guys understand that. They talk the language of love. And they actually, they demonstrate how to be a loving man. It's beautiful. And it works. And they win.
And how to be a loving man looks like what?
Trusting their feelings. And once if you look at an athlete that's really extraordinary, a good example is Jordan Spieth, the #1 golfer in the world. He went to UT. You listen to him talk, he trusts himself. That's the only reason he's better than everybody else. He trusts himself. Why is that? He's got a lot of love in him. And if you look at his family, and he's got a sister who's mentally challenged, and you can really understand this is a guy that's very comfortable being expressive about love. And it translates into his performance.
Interesting. So the talent has to be there. And in addition to that, this connection to the heart, this ability to emote, to feel.
And trust.
And
trust
trust.
yourself. That's the most important thing you can do.
So why is it that you think some men don't trust themselves?
Well, my theory is, and again, this is based on my experience, is we've inherited a lot of unresolved emotions from our fathers and our mothers. And when that happens to us, we don't know what to do with that. We learn from our parents to develop coping strategies. And those coping strategies are not to be present with whatever these emotions are. Mm-hmm. These coping strategies are, well, don't think about that. Think about positive things. Don't deal with what's negative. And we actually are teaching our children to resist the very thing that they need to embrace, which are our negative emotions. If you embrace them and you accept them, just like we were talking about a father talking to a child, these negative emotions actually help you. They teach you about yourself.
So give us an example, like anger. So many men deal with anger. I can't believe how many men have rage that comes out in business dealings.
It does.
I see that every day, and it's just astonishing to me.
Yeah.
And they are not aware of the consequences of unleashing that rage on others. And the responses are very disconnected from the reality of their behavior. So
yeah, anger is a good example. In my opinion, anger comes from fear. And if someone is resistant, they know they have an anger problem, probably, they are going to resist that anger. Mm-hmm. And then it's almost like a passive-aggressive type of pendulum. Mm-hmm. So someone is pretending that they're maybe not angry, but then when they get pushed to their limit, they kind of explode. Mm-hmm. So that's going from one polarity to the other. And that's very common. So what do? You actually learn to embrace the anger.
Okay, we're going to talk about that when we come back. Okay. Jon Zieve is here. He is a life coach. He specializes in working with men. And this has been so interesting, Jon. Fascinating. Do you have a website you'd like to share with anyone?
Yes, thank you. www.jonzieve.com.
And that's spelled?
JONZIE as in Edward, V as in Victor, E.
JonZieve.com. Wonderful. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
When we come back, we're going to talk about that whole anger side and how to manage it. You are listening to Idea Lounge here on your community radio. This is KOOP, Hornsby, Austin, 91.7 FM. We're also coming to you live on koop.org. This is Khotan Shahbazi. Harman, thank you so much for staying with me tonight. And I'm hoping that you're hearing something in the conversation. I don't know, I feel this heaviness to me right now. It's just, I know some folks are hearing this and they're feeling a little heavy. I think this might be stirring up some things for you. So stay with it. We're going to be talking another half an hour. This is not easy stuff. You know, this show's not about easy stuff. But the good thing is we can do hard things. So hang in there. We're going to come back and talk about how men can transform their anger and what does that really mean in our lives. Thank you for staying with me.
I'm Dean Lofton.
And I'm Jeff Lofton.
And we gave our car to Co-op. It's a 91 Honda Civic, so I bought it in 93, and I had the car for 17 years. And it finally just got to where it wouldn't do anymore, and instead of selling it for parts, we gave it to Co-op. It's important for people to have a voice and an outlet for different ideas that aren't covered by commercial radio.
Co-op also needs help, of course, because it's pretty much run by the money from the community. And we believe in community radio.
To donate your moribund vehicle, call us at 877-750-KOOP or visit us online at koop.org.
The Blanton Museum of Arts is currently recruiting volunteer gallery teachers to work with visiting school groups on weekdays. For more information, please contact Sarah Abari at sarh.abare@blantonmuseum.org or 512-471-5512.
Thank you for staying with us. Jon Zieve is here with me tonight. He is a life coach for men in particular. I just think this is so fascinating. So before we went on the break, Jon, we were starting to explore anger in men. What is the underlying reason for anger? Is it fear? Is it lack of love? Is it lack of self-trust? Is it lack of hope? What is anger, and why are so many men angry?
Yeah, so I think it's a combination. What I've noticed is men want to be seen. They want to be heard. And if they don't feel that they are being heard, then anger is a result of that. So the question is, well, why aren't you being heard? And in my case, the reason I wasn't being heard was because I wasn't good about asking for what I wanted.
What does that mean exactly? I mean, literally saying, I want...
Well, expressing my needs.
So I need what? This
well,
sounds
it could be
terrifying.
I need to
affection.
be able to have you listen to me.
Okay.
I want you to listen to me in a non-aggressive way.
So some men believe that if you don't agree with them, you're not listening to them.
Right.
Well, clearly, I am a married woman, right? So can you help me understand that? So there is this difference between hearing someone and agreeing with them. And sometimes, I hope my husband's not listening, sometimes he thinks if I don't agree with him, I have not heard him.
That's true.
What is that about?
Well, that is, I think the truth is, we're not supposed to agree with each other. We're supposed to honor who we are. By agreeing with each other, if we're doing it to please, we're not being honest. So there does need to be a little bit of an education if men are taking that personally as, well, you don't necessarily like me, or you're not listening to me if you don't agree with me. And I think men can be very sensitive.
Very sensitive. And it's amazing how sensitive actually men are.
Correct.
And it's, I've experienced this. It's hard to understand, but you see it, right? In interactions. And you're trying very hard not to offend anyone. So what's the difference between anger and rage? When does anger become rage?
Well, I think it's a function of not being aware that this is a part of their unconscious, and they don't have a way of expressing themselves, and it becomes this uncontrollable burst of emotion.
Does it feel good? Does rage feel good in the body? Or is it just a release of something?
I think it is a release. I don't think it feels good, no, because there's so much anger there. If something is trapped inside you, like anger, then it's going to get triggered, and it can become rage.
What if you feed off of your anger? What if
anger actually can be good? It can be good, yes. I'll give you an example. So when I realized that I was kind of being, quote, like a vampire, searching for love from someone else or their energy, when I connected all those dots, then I got angry with myself. And I said, that's it, no more. I'm not going to do this anymore. That's healthy anger. Another great sports example. I grew up in Chicago, so I'm a huge Michael Jordan fan. So Michael Jordan, in high school, didn't make the varsity team. They posted on the wall the list of the players, and he was so angry, so angry. He went back to his house, his parents' place, and he basically cried for 2 days. He didn't come out. In my opinion, what happened there is he transformed his anger by saying, never again is this going to happen to me, into becoming the greatest basketball player that ever lived. And without that anger, to fuel him, and without him taking a stand, saying, never again will I be humiliated like this, he wouldn't be this greatest athlete of all time. Mm-hmm. So in that case, anger was very healthy.
So how do you know, as a guy, how to differentiate between this will never happen to me again, I will not allow it, and shutting down and becoming disconnected because you don't want to feel the pain, and becoming angry and directing that towards some change and transformation?
Great question. And I think it has to do with being present with the anger. Like, again, Michael Jordan's story, 2 days. He was present with that feeling, and he let it consume him to the point where it didn't consume him anymore, and he was ready to come out of his bedroom. Mm-hmm. His parents allowed him to be present with his anger. They didn't protect him. They didn't say, oh, don't worry about it. They allowed him to wallow in it, to express, to feel it. It's so important to feel. If you're cutting off your feelings, that's not healthy. You need to allow it to come in, ask what it's about. And basically when you do that, you'll realize it starts to dissipate. Mm-hmm. But there's a lesson there.
What happens when women are uncomfortable, afraid, feel uncertain around men's strong emotions? Because if a man is listening and he's living with someone or has a mate or married, I hear a lot that men don't want to feel their emotions, especially sort of afflictive emotions like anger to them, because they don't want to terrify the woman.
Yeah, absolutely. I think men are afraid. Men are afraid of their negative emotions, and just like I think women are afraid of their negative emotions.
Yes.
So that's the most important work to do, is to get comfortable going inside.
So somewhere safe? Because what if a man is going through, is angry, like Michael Jordan crying for 2 days and being very angry? What if someone listening tonight needs that space to go through their emotion? How do they secure that space? Because one of the things I've noticed is that men are very careful about how they're coming across, especially when there are women around, because they don't want to come across as a brute or someone who brutalizes women or abuses women in any way. So they're very careful of that. And as a result, they're always gathering themselves inward, right? Rather than allowing themselves the freedom to be able to express their feelings within moderation, of course. But where does that balance lie?
Just being honest. And so if you recognize that you need space, that you're feeling anger and you don't want your mate to experience that, just be honest and say, you know what? I'm kind of angry with myself right now. I need some space. This has nothing to do with you. This is about me. And just being honest, I mean, that's all you can do. And don't be afraid of the outcome of being honest.
That's an interesting point. I'm letting it hang out there for a minute because that's a hard one.
It's about trust. Trust in who you are. If you're feeling something, there's a reason.
Yeah.
You need to trust it.
Oh boy, that one just triggered a whole bunch of people. So let's talk about what that means. That's a hard thing you're asking. Let's clarify what we're saying. Okay. So what does it mean to trust yourself and trust the process, to know that you're not going to do any damage going through the process? You can manage it, and it's okay to feel your anger. Clearly, you don't want to take it out on anybody around you, or, right? We're not saying release your anger, release the Kraken. We're not saying release that, right? What are you saying exactly? Give them the parameters.
Well, what I'm saying is when you feel something inside that doesn't feel right, it could be any emotion. Anger is just one of many. It could be sadness. It could be fear. It could be whatever. Just be honest that you're feeling it. And if you're with someone and you don't want to depress them,
terrify them.
You don't want
afraid
them to necessarily see a side of you that, just be honest. You know what? I'm feeling something, and I need the space to deal with this. And maybe I can't see you for a day. That's okay. Because what you're basically saying then is you're honoring yourself. You're honoring who you are. And if somebody can't honor you, then there is no trust in that relationship.
Fascinating. That's very interesting. I'm so hoping this will open up some relationships tonight, Jon. Just hearing these words and knowing that people have permission to feel their feelings without clearly harming anyone else. We're not saying take your rage out on your children, your spouse,
right,
the dog. We're saying, know that you have feelings, and then trust yourself and go through the process and know where the limits are. One of the things that seems to be very difficult, and I get a lot of feedback whenever I'm talking to folks about having a radio show and some of the things that we do here, there are two things that I have heard from male listeners. One is that they don't know how to deal with vulnerability. Mm-hmm. They feel very strongly that vulnerability is weakness. To sit there and cry in front of a woman, or to say, I need things that are very basic. I need to be held. I need to be loved. I need to be accepted. I need to be seen. Things that make them feel very afraid. And fear is the other. How to process fear.
Right.
We talked about that with Linda Galvan last week about processing fear, and I got emails coming in around fear. So fear is something that is very real. So let's turn the lens to men only. And when it comes to vulnerability and weakness, how are they the same and how are they different?
Well, my experience with that is to be a strong, powerful man, you have to be vulnerable. You have to be. Again, I'm going to use the sports world. If you talk to any of the elite athletes and or coaches, they will tell you the best athletes are the most vulnerable. And the reason for that is they're in touch with themselves and their heart. You can't be great unless you go that deep. You have to be vulnerable. You cannot get there without being it. So it's actually a huge strength. And I've seen leaders who are vulnerable. And you're just basically saying, hey, I'm human. And I'm being authentic. And that's the way to lead. Force in fear-based motivation does not work. It can work for a short period of time, but is not sustainable. And that's why you see more and more elite coaches have abandoned fear-based. It used to be Bobby Knight was the poster child
with the chair throwing
of fear-based, and he had rage, he had anger. Yeah. Now you have Coach K. Who was a disciple of his, by the way. And these guys preach love. They allow their players to be who they are, and they talk about their heart, and they motivate by having them be themselves. They don't try to get all their players to be the same. They don't try to intimidate them, because they know and they can't be in the present moment if they're in fear.
They cannot be in the present moment if they are in fear.
Right. And when an athlete is tested, it's all reactions. It's all being in the present moment. You cannot be thinking. It's got to be instinctual. You have to trust your intuition. And that's all being in the present moment.
That's wonderful. So vulnerability, it's not crying, because most people I know equate to
it's
be
not.
vulnerable.
It doesn't mean being needy. I think that there's I know from my own experience, being needy is a huge turnoff. It means you want someone else to fix you. And that's not someone else's job. That's your job to go within and ask, why do I feel needy? What is it that I'm missing? And if you ask enough questions, you'll get the answers. You might not like the answers.
But the answers will come.
The answers will come.
Let's talk about identity. So, work.
Yes.
Men and work.
That's a great topic. I think this happens to a lot of men. They feel that they are their work. Their
they
work
really sacrifice so much.
Becomes their identity.
Yes.
And that happened to me.
Is that right?
And it got to a point where I said, I don't like myself. I don't like the person I've become. And when that happened, that's when I knew I had to change. I didn't know how to change, but it's not important to know the how. And this, if there's one thing the listeners get from tonight, I want them to understand this. I read a book called The Power of Intention by Wayne Dyer, who just recently passed away.
Yes.
And in that book, in the first chapter, he spoke about what intention is. Intention is not how. It's setting an intention of what you want and letting go of how it's going to manifest. So if you have someone here that feels that their identity is completely their job and they don't want that anymore, all they need to do is say, I'm going to set an intention right now to for my identity to not be my job, and then let go of the outcome. And they'll be shockingly surprised that will come to them. Mm-hmm. But they're not going to know how or why or when. But it'll happen.
So control is not necessary.
Control is not good.
Let's talk about control.
Okay. Control is not good. Think about, why do you want to control in the first place? It's because you're not comfortable, maybe, with one or two options or outcomes. But that means you don't trust. And are we saying we know enough that we know what's best for us? I don't think we can say that. I think all we can do is listen. Like I was saying earlier, respond to our energy, trust our energy, and then set intentions for what we want and let go of how that materializes in our lives. Mm-hmm. Trust that there's something greater than fear. Trust that there's a power greater than fear.
I like that.
And say, I'm willing to work with that power that's greater than fear.
Mm. And how do you manage fear, since you're mentioning fear?
The same way you manage anger is observe it, be aware. I'm afraid. Okay.
Is that shameful for men to feel afraid?
It can be if they're not used to it. If they're not used to the process. But allowing it to come into their consciousness and say, oh, I'm afraid. Okay. That's fine. Why? Start asking. There's usually a reason. Mm-hmm. It's serving them somehow. Ask the question, how is this serving me?
That's a good question.
If you're not really comfortable asking questions, the best way to do it, or if you're not used to it, is before you go to bed, write down a question or say it out loud. Or like I do, my phone's next to my bed and I actually type it into my iPhone. When I wake up in the morning, maybe I'm taking a shower, the answer comes. And here's a little trick. If you don't get the answer, sometimes you get up and you go to the bathroom and you forget everything that happened during the night. Go back in bed, lay down in the exact spot that you woke up in, and usually the answer will come to you.
That's very funny. That's very funny. My goodness, Jon, there's so much to talk about. I want to talk a little bit more about what happens when you're saying your sense of identity is not tied to your work.
Mm-hmm.
And then I know for sports, that is an arena where men can connect to each other emotionally.
Mm-hmm.
Is the same true at work?
I think it is. And I saw that firsthand when I decided to change the way I showed up to work. So the last 2 years that I was at my company, I decided to change the way I managed, and I stopped managing the task and I started managing the person. And it was a very beautiful experience because most of the team were men, and they opened up, and it wasn't about work. It was about, what are they thinking? What are their fears? And I realized that they performed much, much better. Their motivation went so much higher because they felt that they were being heard. That is so important. So if we show up differently, we can be in the same job, show up differently, be conscious about how we're showing up, set intentions to be different, and you can have a completely different experience. And that's what I did. And I loved my job the last 2 years. I really did.
That's wonderful. So what would you say if men listening are looking for that network, that support system, the mentors? Who can they reach out to? It's such a difficult process because you have to be vulnerable to reach out to someone.
Yeah, I think the best thing would be to just think about the man in your sphere.
Right now, that
Right now. And think about someone who's emotionally in touch. And just maybe set up a lunch date and say, tell me how you got to be the way you are. That's what I would do. And another idea would just, I do believe life coaching does work.
Yeah.
I really do.
So get a Sherpa to walk you up the mountain if you need it. Like a real coach, right? Like
coach. And all the coach is going to do is allow you to experience what it's like to go inside to get your own answers.
Yes.
They're not going to tell you what to do.
They shouldn't, at least.
They shouldn't.
So what should they look for in a mentor?
Someone they respect who trusts themselves. Because if they trust themselves, then they're in tune with their heart.
There's that heart word again.
Yes.
You're not going to let that go, are you?
Mm-mm.
Because you found it, and now it's who you are.
Yeah.
You were here a couple years ago. You've changed a lot since coming back.
Oh, thank you. I was here, I think, a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It feels like you are more in your power. You feel that?
Mm-hmm. I do.
Why do you think that is?
Because I'm being true to who I am.
And you're being truthful.
Yeah. I'm not trying to please you. I'm just speaking my truth.
You could try to please me a little. It's all right. I won't hold it against you. It's so interesting, Jon. What is your hope for our dear men listening? They're so wonderful. These amazing men who sacrifice so much. They get the job done. They try to be strong for everyone. They really, I do love the men in our community. I haven't met a bad one yet. What is your hope for them?
Well, I think the opportunity is huge to go within, to listen to our hearts. We will be more creative if we do that. We will be more intuitive. We will provide more love to those around us. And we'll love ourselves, which is a prerequisite to love someone else.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. And if anyone is interested in chatting with you, what is the best website for you?
It's my website, the www.jonzie, as in Edward, V as in Victor, E.com.
And so walk someone through the process so they know what to expect.
Well, coaching with me starts with a series of questions. I send a form out and ask you to identify kind of what's troubling you, what would you like to focus on. And then we get together, and actually I do a lot of work on the phone, and I'm starting to do work over email. And I find it's just as effective. Of course, I do in person too, but I have clients in like Toronto, and it really doesn't matter where you are. So we just sit down and explore what it is that you want to find out about yourself. Is it a fear? Is it your purpose? You define what it is that you want to work on. The responsibility is yours. And then I guide you through this process of connecting to your own answers so you can be self-sufficient and you don't need me.
Very interesting. It's an interesting process. Who is your ideal client?
My ideal client is someone who knows they want to change. They just don't know how.
And is it a certain age group?
Not really. My clients tend to be in their mid-30s to 60s, but it can be anywhere. I mean, I actually coached a child who is a daughter of a client. It really depends on, they need to want to be guided. If they're doing it for someone else, that's not going to work. They have to generally want to have guidance to connect to themselves. They just don't know how.
And the process can be very daunting. So it's good to have someone to walk with you.
It can be a little bit, but I think it's just, I think it's exciting and I think it's beautiful. I don't think it's to be feared at all.
And if anyone wanted to think through how they change their career, what would you say?
It's really all the same.
Is it?
It's all going inside and asking and starting to be aware of your energy. What gives you energy? What takes away energy? And you can just do this right now. You can start keeping a journal of what activities did I do during the day that gave me energy, and what activities did I notice, or the people I was around that took energy away. And what they're going to notice, what you're going to notice, is when you're not honoring yourself, when you're doing something when you don't want to do it, you don't feel good. And that's a sign that you need to be saying no.
We have to leave it right there. Thank you, Jon, for coming in.
Thank you very much.
This was fun.
I've enjoyed it.
I learned a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you all for listening tonight. You've been listening to Idea Lounge here on your community radio, KOOP Hornsby Austin 91.7 FM, koop.org. I know that some of you heard something tonight that has moved something for you. So be good to yourself. Be kind. Awareness is the first step, and it is a journey. So take one step at a time. And if you need resources, there are plenty of resources out there. And I hope that you have a wonderful week filled with wonder and joy and all the things that make you happy. I'll see you here next week.
The Blanton Museum of Arts is currently recruiting volunteer gallery teachers to work with visiting school groups on weekdays. For more information, please contact Sarah Bari at sarah.abare@blantonmuseum.org or 512-471-5512.
The Asian American Resource Center is a cultural facility of the Austin Parks and Recreation Department that provides resources, services, cultural, and educational programs that bring Austin's diverse communities together. The AARC is located at 8401 Cameron Road and hosts ongoing events and venue rentals. The calendar of events is available at www.aarc.org.